The Sound Blaster MCV is one of the rarest Sound Blaster cards ever made, designed for IBM's microchannel architecture. In fact, it's so rare, you're not very likely to ever see one in person. So that leaves us with only one option, to build clones. Of course, the Sound Blaster MCV deserves the right vintage IBM. That's why I picked up this PS2 Model 90, one of the last and arguably the best PS2 models IBM ever made. Before the clone can find a home though, this PS2 needs some serious attention. The CD-ROM and floppy drive suffers from leaky caps that have soaked the PCBs in highly corrosive electrolytes, and as we soon discover, those aren't the only problems waiting for us. So in this video, we'll build a Sound Blaster MCV clone, restore as much of this Model 90 as we can, and see just how close we can get to bringing it all together. Okay, so first impression. Well, it's a really grimy machine. It's a strange sight to see a super rare machine like this in such an awful condition. But here it is. Let's see if we can make it nice again. It's so small it's hard to show on camera, but there is a small sticker here that tells us that this is a 9590 DLG. And in the slots here we've got one SCSI controller, one graphics card, a network card, and an empty bay for our sound card. To get inside we need to undo two thumb screws at the back. And that frees up the cover. Ew! This is a smelly one. This machine has not been stored well. And it badly needs a bath. I have been inside this machine once before to remove the leaky caps. But that was a long time ago, so I don't really remember much. And apparently I had forgotten how badly it smells. Okay, so from the left here we've got the SCSI controller. Instead of screws on top here, MCA machines have a thumb screw at the back. That needs to come undone. That frees up the cards. I'll talk more about these cards when we reassemble the machine. But that was obviously an IBM SCSI card with cache. This card has a sticker that reveals that it's an XGA2 graphics card. And the third card is our network card. And the next thing to come out is this air duct. This IBM has a big fan in front here, blowing the air on the cards. And this air duct prevents the air from going in this direction and instead blows it on this card. And speaking of which, the Model 90 doesn't have the CPU on the motherboard. Instead, it's installed on one of these cards. So if you wanted to upgrade your machine back in the day, you could just buy a new CPU card and replace it. And I'm definitely going to upgrade this machine, but I'm not sure if it's going to be in this video. Next we have this plastic bracket here. It seems to be stuck. But here it comes. So if we pull one of these out, here's our RAM. We'll check how much later. But I'm not going to do anything before the wash, because this machine stinks. And here's our second RAM card. The CD-ROM drive has a rather funny suntan. And that is of course because of the shape of the bezel. It has cutouts for the eject button and the volume knob. And the drive sled of course. The drives are removed by pulling on a tab underneath. And then just pushing the drive out. Same thing with this drive. Now I can remove the SCSI cable and the floppy cable. And down here we have the hard drive, installed in the same way as the other two drives. And it's a Conner CP3540 SCSI drive, manufactured for IBM, so this is probably the original drive. But I am actually waiting for something new that I'm going to try in this machine, but I have no idea if it will arrive this week. So we may or may not install it in this video. Next I think we need to remove this bracket here, with the thumb screw. I'm not sure what it's for, it looks like some sort of stabilizer. Next I think we need to remove this screw. Probably release this cable here. From what I can tell, The power supply is also held down with 2 screws from the back. And I think that frees up the power supply. Yep. This power supply has regular Molex, but then the power is supplied to the motherboard through these 2 edge connectors here. Weird and wonderful IBM PS2 stuff. Well, the motherboard is by no means small, but it is significantly smaller than the motherboard in the Model 95. And that makes me wonder, because the Model 90 is often referred to as the desktop version of the 95. So how were they able to make this board so much smaller? And at least one of the reasons why it's so much smaller is because of the RAM installation on these riser cards. On the Model 95, all the RAM sticks are installed on the motherboard down here, making the board significantly larger. There could be more differences, but this is the obvious one. And here's our motherboard. Well, I don't see any corrosion, so that's a good start. But it is incredibly dusty. This drive cage is installed with rivets, so we're going to leave it in. But the lower drive cage seems to be held down with a couple of screws underneath. So let's remove them. And these screws are different from all the other screws, so I need to keep track of these. Yep, sure enough, that freed up the drive cage. I'm disassembling as much as possible to make the wash as thorough as possible, since it's so smelly. The fan here is installed in this large cage going all the way back. I see, I found the screws underneath. So that's probably how it comes out. And as expected, that fan is absolutely disgusting. Yuck. I should probably wear gloves for stuff like this. The speaker and the power switch are held down with a screw in the front here. Too bad the switch isn't red, like on early PS2s. And here's our speaker and power switch. I'm gonna remove the bezel at the back too, so I can wash in between. Ah, I see. It's also held down with a lock. So we need to remove it too. Well, that's a bit of an overkill. The bezel at the back is made out of heavy die-cast aluminium. The power supply doesn't have any rating, which I find a bit strange. And it's put together with security screws, of course. And my usual disclaimer, please don't mess around inside power supplies. Some of the caps inside here could be charged with mains voltage. That being said, this power supply should be safe to mess around with. I know, because I have owned it for many years and I have never turned it on. So the caps have had plenty of time to discharge. Well, as expected, pretty disgusting inside here too. And the good news is there are no refus, nothing is bulging or leaking. So this power supply is ready for a wash. And now to our main issue with this machine, aside from washing that smell off. So both of the drives are known to have caps that leak and just completely destroy the PCBs inside. Since it's a well-known issue, I removed the caps when I bought the machine. And I don't remember what the condition is of the PCB. So let's find out together and see if it's still savable. Okay, I left the connectors unconnected and most of the screws out. There's definitely some cap puke here and corrosion on a bunch of the chips. But I have seen worse, so maybe we can save this one. Yeah, same thing here. This chip too. This chip. Well, actually about half of the chips has some corrosion on them. Yeah, it's really hard to tell how bad this is until we have cleaned it. So keep your fingers crossed. I have managed to repair 2 of these, but I'm still struggling with 2 drives that I have not been able to repair yet. So if you have a PS2 drive, pause this video and get those damn caps out immediately. Just hope for the best. And the same thing goes for the diskette drive. They have leaky caps too. I removed them when I bought the machine, but I don't remember the condition of the board. And the leaky caps are underneath this PCB. Okay, let's check this drive. Okay, this is actually much better. I can see some mild corrosion on some of the components here. but this is nothing compared to what we have seen in some other drives. So this drive definitely looks savable. That's actually a really unusual drive. I have repaired countless of PS2 drives, never seen one of these before. I'll show you some more when we repair it later in the video. Well, that's a big pile. I'll wash everything off camera, and we'll get back to the PS2 after we have built the card. Okay, said and done. While all the bits and pieces are drying, let's see what my favorite sponsor has sent us today and build that epic sound card. Well, if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know my favorite PCB is gold on lime green. So we have previously built one of these cards in regular green. However, some cards back in the 80s had a lighter green color, somewhat similar to these PCBs. And since it's my favorite, I wanted to build one of these too. And as expected, these boards look great. It's not quite the same color they had back in the day, but these matte green PCBs, at least to me, have the right look and feel. So let's build one up and see how it looks with all the components installed. One big difference between the clone and the original Sound Blaster is that it uses a CPLD instead of an 82C612. And these are XC9572XL. They are a bit pricey on Mauser, but I bought a whole bag of these for cheap from AliExpress. I have tried one of them and it worked. So probably just a regular original chip in much lesser packaging. I aligned the chip off camera and soldered one leg on each side. And now I can go ahead and drag solder the chip. And with a good flux, a chip like this is super easy to solder. And with all four sides soldered, we can remove all the bridges just by pulling them off the pins and cleaning the tip in between. And if they're stubborn, I just add some more flux. That tends to solve the problem. Yep, that totally fixed it. I cleaned up most of the flux here, just so I could inspect the solder joints. And then I'll clean some more after we have installed all the surface mount components on this side of the board. Which aren't that many actually. So we have the CPLD, and then we have a voltage regulator here. And then we have a few caps around the chip here. And the rest is through hole. So pretty lengthy card to build, but it's not a difficult project. The only difficult thing with this project is to get it on camera. These are tiny little buggers, so I highly recommend ordering a few extra. If you drop it on the floor, it's gone forever. And the rest is through-hole components, so let's move on to the resistors. And there are a shitload of them. I think there are more than 20 different values. One thing to pay attention to when it comes to the resistors is that some of them have the same value, like R10 and R13 here. But R13 has to be a 1% tolerance, so don't mix them up. So the most limiting thing with retro gaming on IBM PS2 stuff used to be the lack of available sound cards. Creative did make a Sound Blaster 1.0 for the Weird and Wonderful MCA bus, but it was way more expensive than regular ISA cards. So they didn't sell that many. And that of course makes them crazy rare nowadays. So if you can find one for sale, it's gonna cost you a fortune. But luckily TubeTime reverse engineered this card a bunch of years ago. And in doing so, made IBM PS2 way more fun to play around with. Okay, I added a bunch more stuff on the card. But then unfortunately I ran into a minor issue. Now, to be perfectly fair, Mauser rarely makes any mistakes, at least with my orders. But for once they did. So I got the wrong beads. I checked the part numbers on the bag, and they were correct, so for once it's not my mistake. So I checked my stash and I found these. So I'm just going to put a lead through one of these beads and install it like this. And hopefully this should solve the problem. These PCBs, by the way, have been modified slightly for my personal taste by Guru. These cards look great as they are, but I prefer a slightly different solder mask. So I asked him for some help to add a Sound Blaster logo in the middle of the card The original card and the clone doesn't have this logo here. And I think it looks great. Well, I was just about to install the sockets on the new card. But then I had a look at some pictures online of the original card. And that card actually doesn't have any sockets. Well, except for the 82C612. Now it is good practice to use sockets when installing chips. But I think I'm going to make an exception with this card to give it a more original look and feel. To minimize the risk of installing a bad chip, I'm going to install the chips from this working card. I have played a bunch of games with this card, so I know all the chips are good. And then I'll just go ahead and install all my new chips on this card. Okay, the pile on the bench is getting pretty small. So that means we are almost finished. So next up we have the audio jacks and the joystick port. And they are snapping. By the way, if you're planning to build one of these cards, you will need to program 2 of the chips. And if you need more details, then check out this video. In that video I showed how to program the 2 chips. And in this video I'll skip that step. And the card is finally finished. I'm not going to complain because I love this project. But damn, this is a lengthy project. So if you decide to build one of these, you better be a patient person. So, what do you guys think? Dark green or lime green? Well, I definitely prefer it without sockets. They both look really good, but I actually prefer the lime green one. And especially without sockets. It's not meant to fool anyone, it's quite different from the original card. But with this look, it definitely looks period correct. And it looks like it belongs in the PS2. Files for printable brackets are available at TubeTime's GitHub page. And the only thing left to do is to test this card and see if it actually works. And all the bits and pieces for the Model 90 are back from the wash. Nice and clean. As I mentioned earlier, I had removed the leaky caps from both drives when I bought the machine. And I made the lists. So I know what to put back on. And there are only 2 caps on this board. So let's add a splash of solder on one of the pads. And then we can reflow the solder and install this SMD cap. And this guy is a 33 micro 10 volt cap. And the other cap is a 100 micro 10 volt through hole cap. And this guy here is a low profile cap. And it probably has to be to fit. Before I flip that PCB over, I'm going to apply some PTFE on the shaft here. While we have easy access. I greased the rail and the worm shaft on this side too. And placed 1 drop of machine oil on the bearings for the stepper motor. And note this weird contraption here. Never seen one of these before. I think it's the most over-engineered damper I have ever seen. Let's insert a disc. Yeah, I think that's what it is. We'll test that drive in a minute, but first, let's have a look at the CD-ROM drive. So these drives use a rather strange type of caps. So these are SMD caps, but it's actually a cylindrical cap inside the plastic housing. Very strange caps, and these leak like crazy. I'm going to replace them with regular through-hole caps. And I'm just going to chop off the leads and bend them like this, so they can be installed on the board laying flat. But before I install the caps, I'm going to take care of this corrosion here for 2 reasons. First of all, the solder joints here are quite possibly cracked and may not have a good connection to the board. And secondly, there is also a risk that the corrosion will continue if I don't remove it. So what I'm going to do here is to apply good flux to all the corroded pins. And then I'm going to use a large tip with a blob of solder. And then let the flux and the heat do the job. So I'm basically reflowing all the chips. And all the corroded pins are going to be tinned. This is actually working really well. So the flux is doing a really good job of removing the corrosion. And then I'm going to pull those bridges off and check every single pin on the entire board. Okay, all the corroded legs on all the chips are now tinned, and I have installed all the caps. I did a test fit and I had to replace this cap down here with a regular SMD cap. because there wasn't quite room enough inside the drive here. I tried to bend it the other way, but it didn't help, so I had to replace it. Okay, so the mighty IBM Model 90 has been reassembled. Let's flip that switch and see what it does. Absolutely nothing. Oh crap, something popped. I decided to have a look inside the power supply, but everything looks okay in here. Nothing has started to bulge or leak. Unfortunately, I can't test this power supply disconnected from the motherboard, because the power switch is connected directly to the motherboard. And strangely enough, I wasn't able to find a pinout for the connectors, so we could do a partial test of voltages, but we couldn't tell for sure if something is missing. Let's try with some deoxit on the connector to the power switch. If this connector has some corrosion, it might be our issue. I forgot to mention, I had already replaced the coin cell, and I have cleaned all the edge connectors, power connectors included. But since it doesn't start, I cleaned the edge connectors for the power cables again. So with most of the stuff disconnected from the motherboard, let's test again. There it goes. No, the fan is not spinning up in the power supply. Let's try with some RAM installed. Nope, nothing. Let's check and see if we get any voltages here. Nothing. Nothing. No, I'm not getting anything on any of the pins. No, it's not powering up at all. Crap. But this doesn't really tell us if the fault is in the power supply or somewhere else. Okay, I found a spare power supply in my stash. And the machine is now posting. Okay, so apparently we have a faulty power supply to fix. Okay, everything reconnected in the machine. Let's try that again. And I have the reference disk in the drive now. And if you're new to PS2 stuff, the reference disk is the way into BIOS on these machines, sort of. And since we have replaced the coin cell battery, we're gonna get a bunch of errors that we need to fix. Well, this is strange. It's stuck at 171, which I think is a bad CMOS battery. But I have replaced that coin cell, so I don't quite see why it gets stuck here. Well, this is a bit unexpected. I have disconnected the hard drive now to make sure it's not an IML thing. No, this behavior is new to me. Not sure what to think of this. Let's try with a different diskette drive. No, still stuck at 171. Well, the coin cell battery that came with this machine actually had some corrosion underneath. So maybe we have some corrosion in the battery holder. I'll clean it with deoxit and see if it helps. No, it's still stuck at 171. Huh. Okay, I found the fault. I used my abrasive pen and cleaned the connectors some more in the battery holder. And now the machine boots. Awesome. I'll put the cards back in and reboot. Since we have removed the battery, we need to configure the system. And these machines predate the way we configure the BIOS on modern machines. So we need to run a reference diskette. However, the Model 90 and 95 don't have just one reference diskette. Instead, they have different reference diskettes, depending on what CPU complex is installed. And this machine came with a Type 2. So we're going to boot this machine with a Type 2 reference diskette. Oh crap, it's stuck at 171 again. Well, in that case, I'll use some more deoxit and abrasive pen and clean that coin cell holder some more. That's some pretty stubborn corrosion. But we'll just clean some more until we get a good connection. Actually, more cleaning doesn't seem to help. So this may actually be a different issue. And not that coin cell holder. Let's try with a different CPU complex. Okay, I found a spare Type 2 card. Let's give this a try. No, unfortunately, that didn't help. So, what the heck could this be? Well, this is strange. I replaced the coin cell battery. Now the machine posts. This doesn't make any sense to me. So, I guess it was a bad connection after all. Well, maybe this board is just a bit finicky after a battery replacement. I will of course check for consistency and get back to this later in the video. But for now, let's configure the system. Well, the error came back. And this time I cleaned the connectors with some sandpaper. And now the machine posts again. So let's see if that was enough. And while the reference diskette running, we are now getting a battery error, which was expected of course since we have replaced it. And we are prompted to set time and date. I'm just gonna go for a random date here while we troubleshoot this machine. And now the machine runs the automatic configuration. Well, I did a few more reboots and I cleaned those connectors some more. But unfortunately the 171 just keeps coming back. Well, that's quite a lot for one machine. Bad power supply and a bad motherboard. But we still need to test everything else. So now I have installed the CPU complex in the Model 95. Let's test it and make sure it's good. So I've turned the machine on with the reference disk for the Type 2 card. We're getting an IML error, and that's expected. And that is because the settings for a different CPU complex are stored on the hard drive. So we need to configure this machine. Processor card change. Automatic configuration is being run. Automatic configuration complete. Okay, so let's go to Backup Restore System Programs and restore the system partition. So what the machine does now is to store all the settings on the hard drive. This is, by the way, the 95 XP that we have restored and overclocked on this channel about a year ago. And after a reboot, it's now copying the data into the system partition on the hard drive. Okay, and now we are prompted to insert the diagnostic diskettes. I'm not a big fan of the IML. It has actually caused us more trouble than it has been convenient. But once we fixed it in the previous video, it has been working perfectly since then. The restoration of the system partition is complete. Insert reference disk. That's a lot of disk swapping, but we only need to do this once when we configure a new system. So it's not a big deal. So these machines predates how we access the BIOS on more modern machines. So it kind of sits in between older systems with jumpers and switches on the motherboard and slightly newer machines with access to BIOS pretty much as we do on modern machines. Okay, and the machine boots. So the complex seems to be okay. Okay, so let's continue and test the diskette drive with the leaky caps from the Model 90. They hadn't leaked much, but you never know. Okay, it seeks. We've got a 174 and it reads the disk. Okay, so I think the drive is working. But why did we get a 174? Let's check. Automatic configuration is being run. Okay, so that was a bit odd, because the only thing we did was to replace the diskette drive. Oh, I see. The original drive in this machine is a 2.88 meg drive, but the drive from our troublesome Model 90 is actually a 1.44 meg drive. You can tell because it actually says with tiny legends on the eject button here, 1.44. Quite often the eject button is so worn you can't tell. In that case you can go to set configuration and then view configuration. And down here it clearly says 1.44 megs or 2.88 if that's what you have in your machine. Okay, and now to the star of the show. The Sound Blaster MCV. Let's test it and see if it works. To install a new card in an IBM PS2 system, we need to boot to the reference disk again. Now we're getting a 165, which means found new hardware. Automatic configuration, no thanks, because instead we're going to go down here, copy an option diskette, remove the reference diskette, and insert disk for the Sound Blaster card. Remove the diskettes and insert the ref disk. So now it made a copy of the needed files from the Sound Blaster diskette onto the reference diskette for the Type 2 card. And now we need to reboot. And from here on it's basically plug and play, because now we have all the necessary files on the reference disk for this machine. And this time we can choose yes for automatic configuration, because now we have the files necessary on the diskette. And we're done. So now we can remove the ref disk. And we only need to use it the next time we install a new card. Okay, now the machine boots without any errors. And the Sound Blaster card is installed. Okay, next up we have the leaky CD-ROM drive. Now this had quite a lot of corrosion, so keep your fingers crossed. And since we have added more hardware, we need to run the ref disk again. I love the operator panel on these machines. It's very cool 90s. But I don't like the white power buttons, so someone needs to make printable power switches for these machines. In red, of course. And we've got a 174. Configuration error. Automatic configuration is being run. And 174 is, of course, because we have added a SCSI drive. SCSI devices are being configured. Automatic configuration complete. So let's go to set configuration and set and view SCSI devices. This is not necessary, but let's check. Okay, this is looking good. So the SCSI adapter is at ID 7, the hard drive at ID 6, and then we have the CD-ROM drive at ID 3. So this is looking good. Let's reboot. And DOS already has CD-ROM drive installed here. Okay, let's see if it actually works. After all that cap juice. And these are caddy drives, by the way. Okay, so it kept the caddy. That's a good start. Because sometimes if they are messed up, it will just spit that caddy out. Okay, let's go to D:, list the directory. Here it goes. Yes! Haha! It works! Awesome! So this is the third drive that I have managed to repair. But there are still 2 drives on the bench here that need some more fixing. So I'm gonna get back to these in a future video. But this is awesome. I left the front panel off because it needs some peroxide and a nice suntan. Okay, now to the final tests. Let's see if that Sound Blaster makes any noises. We are of course going to try it with Monkey Island. Yes! Awesome! It is working. So, not a perfect week for sure. We'll of course order some components and make a repair video. We'll see if we can fix that power supply and motherboard. Because if any machine deserves to be repaired, it is definitely the mighty Model 90. And then we are of course going to upgrade the crap out of that machine. But that's all I had for you guys today. Before you leave, like, subscribe and leave a comment. And consider joining me on Patreon. And I will see you guys again next week.